right, we're on Taharot, Perek Tet, Mishnah Tet, ninth and final Mishnah in the ninth chapter of Masechet Taharot. So the way we learned it, we learned about the gathering of the harvesting of the olives. You took the olives and you dumped them in this mit'an, and they shmushed together and they created this thing called an is like the mother pile of olives all squished together. So then what you would do is, okay, you would taka yated ba'om. You stuck a stake into the lafrida because what you're going to do is you're going to take that that whole big pile of mushed olives together. You have to take some of them and you want to stick them into the baskets that you're going to press. Okay, so now that when you do that, that creates kama chalakim prudim. That creates a number of different separated sections, gushim as we call them, blocks. So b'chol gush v'gush, okay, and in every little block from these pieces, yesh zeitim medubakim. It has olives stuck together. So now what happens if I found a sheretz al gabe prudim? So I remember I had this big blob of olives. I took my stake and I dug in and I divided into chunks. And I found a sheretz on the chunks. V'hu nogea b'kebetza. And the sheretz is touching a kebetza, a chunk the size of a kebetza. Then tameh, the whole thing is tameh. Because remember, how big must food be? The olives are food in Mekabel Tuma. In order to transfer its Tuma to other things, it has to be a kebetza. So once it's the size of a kebetza, it can transfer Tuma to the whole gush. Tameh kol hagush. Okay, even though it's not connected, when you stuck this because you drove the stake into it and divided it up, mikol makom, nonetheless. Kivan diesh begush zeh, zeitim tmeim. Since this block, this prude, whatever, this block has kishir letamei achim, enough size, it's kebeta, in order to make other sizes, other pieces tamei. Nasa chibur letamei kol shar zeitim. So it's a chibur, it's a connection in order to make the whole thing tamei. Prudim agabe prudim. But if there are blocks on blocks, afapishu nogea bekebetza, meaning if it's a block touching the whole, it sounds like it's a block touching the whole thing. Then the sheretz is on this block touching it, a kibetz as well, then the whole thing is tamei. But if it's a block touching another block, one block on top of another block, then ein tamei ela makom magao. Then it's only tamei, only the part of that it touches is tamei, and not the rest of it, even because it's not, the Bar Kahati says, because they're not one gush, okay, and it's separated from the other gush. Okay, the other gushim, the Kahati seems to say, are touching less than a kebetza of this piece. I'm not really sure I understand why that is. I think the Kahati is explaining, well, if I have a gush the size of a kebetza, and like a big gush, and then it's touching a smaller gush, and then it's touching another gush. So at some point, the big gush transfers to the smaller gush, but then it can't pass it on. That's what the Hadakati is explaining it. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand why Ein Tamei Ela Makam Mago. It has to be stopped, I guess, by a small enough piece. That's not a kebetza that can't transfer the tuma on. That's how we understand it. The Bartuda doesn't explain it any other way. Nimtza bein kotel zeitim. If you find the sheretz between a wall and the olives, meaning on the outside of the mit'an, outside of this big vat, tahor. You don't have to assume that it touched it. Nimtza bagag. If you find the sheretz on the roof, meaning you add the olives in the mit'an, and then you take them up to then you're gonna you let them ripen. Now you take them up to the roof in order to dry. Ma'atan, and the ma'atan tahor. You can assume that the sheretz was only on the gag, and whatever's in the ma'atan is still tahor. But nimtza ma'atan. Let's say you take a bunch of olives up to the roof, and then when you get to the middle of the ma'atan, you found the sheretz. Hagag tameh. You have to assume that the sheretz was in there all the time, and whatever's on the gag is also tameh. You can't say, oh, that's gag. No, you got it from somewhere. You got it from the ma'atan. Nimtza saruf ala zeitim. Let's say you found a sheretz that's burnt. V'chein matlit mehuha. Mehuha is an interesting word. I looked it up in the Jastro. Maha, mehuha, threadbare and ragged. And we have a Jastro bonus, a tattered, scorched piece of cloth. So a burnt sheretz is not mitameh, and neither is a matlit mehuha, a shredded. It's interesting. The Bartanura says mehuha. Okay, it's begesh in trachech be'esh. It has been singed. It's like now it's very threadbare, like spider webs. So in those cases, tahora, you can assume it's tahor. Shekalat me'ot k'sha'at mitziatam. You can only treat tuma as the moment, as the hour, as the time which you found it. And when you found the sheretz, it was burnt, so you don't have to assume it got burnt after it touched your olives. We'll stop here. Dedicate our learning to remember you, my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Make it a great day.